The governor of Texas is under pressure this morning to stop the planned execution of a woman named Melissa Lucio. Back in 2008, she was found guilty in the death of her 2-year-old little girl.
Case 1. Melissa Elizabeth Lucio. She is the first Latina woman sentenced to death in Texas. She was raised by a single mother alongside her 5 siblings. Beginning at the age of 6, Lucio was regularly abused by her mother's boyfriend, leading to a troubled childhood. She entered into a series of abusive relationships and had 14 children. At the time of her daughter Mariah's death, the family was living in poverty. She was 38 years old when her 2-year-old daughter, Mariah Alvarez, died in 2007. On February 15, 2007, Mariah reportedly fell down a flight of stairs while the family was moving homes. 2 days later, she was found unresponsive and pronounced dead. Medical examinations revealed bruising in various stages of healing and internal injuries, leading authorities to suspect abuse. Lucio was arrested and interrogated for several hours. During this time, she made statements that were interpreted as a confession, though she later maintained her innocence, asserting that Mariah's death was accidental. In 2008, Lucio was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. The prosecution argued that she had physically abused Mariah, leading to her death. The defense contended that Mariah's injuries were consistent with a fall and that Lucio's statements during interrogation were coerced. Critics of the trial have pointed to a lack of physical evidence directly linking Lucio to intentional harm and have raised concerns about the adequacy of her legal representation. In April 2022, just days before her scheduled execution, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals granted a stay and ordered a review of new evidence suggesting her innocence. In April 2024, Senior State District Judge Arturo Nelson declared Lucio actually innocent, citing suppressed evidence and false testimony during her trial. The case has been forwarded to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals for a final decision on overturning her conviction and death sentence. As of October 2025, Melissa Lucio remains on death row in Texas, awaiting the decision regarding her conviction and sentence. She has spent approximately 17 years on death row. Case 2. Erica Yvonne Shepard. Erica was born on September 1, 1973, and was only 19 years old when she participated in the murder of 43-year-old Marilyn Sage Meager on June 30, 1993. Erica endured a tumultuous upbringing characterized by poverty, abuse, and multiple instances of sexual assault. By age 19, she had experienced numerous adverse childhood events, including assault and domestic violence. She became a mother at 16, which forced her to leave school to care for her child. In an attempt to escape an abusive marriage, Shepard sought refuge at a women's shelter, but was unable to secure long-term assistance, leaving her desperate and vulnerable. On June 30, 1993, Shepard and an accomplice, James Dickerson, planned to rob Marilyn Meager in her Houston, Texas apartment. During the robbery, Meager was fatally attacked. Shepard's direct involvement in the crime led to her arrest shortly thereafter. In 1995, Erica Shepard was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. Her trial has been criticized for not adequately considering her history of abuse and mental health issues. Subsequent appeals have highlighted claims of ineffective legal representation and the failure to present mitigating evidence during the sentencing phase. Despite these appeals, her conviction and death sentence have been consistently upheld. As of October 2025, Erica Shepard is 51 years old and has been on death row in Texas for approximately 32 years. Case 3. Tiffany Nicole Moss. She was born on July 20, 1983, and was 30 years old when she committed the tragic murder of her 10-year-old stepdaughter, Imani Gabrielle Moss, in October 2013. Imani was born on April 23, 2003, and after her mother's death, she lived with her father, Rene Moss, and his new wife, Tiffany, in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Reports indicate that young Imani suffered years of horrific abuse at the hands of her stepmother. The abuse included severe physical beatings and deliberate starvation used as punishment. In 2010, Tiffany was charged with child cruelty after beating Imani with an object, but she received only probation and later regained custody of the child, allowing the abuse to continue. In 2013, Tiffany Moss began systematically starving Imani as a cruel form of discipline. By October 28, 2013, the little girl succumbed to the effects of prolonged starvation, weighing only 32 pounds at the time of her death. In a desperate attempt to conceal their crime, Tiffany and Rene Moss set fire to Imani's remains. The burned body was discovered shortly thereafter by authorities. Rene Moss pleaded guilty to his role in his daughter's death in 2015 and was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Tiffany Moss chose to represent herself during her 2019 trial. She was found guilty on all counts, including malice murder, felony murder, first-degree cruelty, and concealing the death of another. On May 1, 2019, Tiffany Moss was sentenced to death, making her the only woman on Georgia's death row at that time. As of October 2025, Tiffany Moss is 41 years old and has been on death row for approximately 5 years. Case 4. Linda Anita Carty. Linda was born on October 5, 1958 in St. Kitts and is a British national and former school teacher who has been on death row in Texas since 2002. She was convicted for the abduction and murder of 20-year-old Joanna Rodriguez in 2001, with the alleged motive being to kidnap Rodriguez's newborn son. Carty immigrated to the United States where she worked as a school teacher. She also served as an informant for the Drug Enforcement Administration, a role that has been central to her defense claims throughout her appeals. In May 2001, Joanna Rodriguez was found dead in the trunk of a car, and her 3-day-old son was discovered unharmed in a nearby vehicle. Prosecutors allege that Carty orchestrated the entire crime, enlisting 3 men to assist in the abduction and murder with the intention of stealing Rodriguez's baby for herself. In February 2002, Linda Carty was convicted of capital murder and subsequently sentenced to death. She has consistently maintained her innocence, asserting that she was framed by her co-defendants who were involved in drug activities as retaliation for her work as a DEA informant. Despite numerous efforts and appeals, her conviction and death sentence have been upheld in various courts. As of October 2025, she has been on death row in Texas for approximately 23 years. Case 5. Darlie Lynn Routier. She was born on January 4, 1970, and was 26 years old when her 2 sons, Devin, 6, and Damon, 5, were fatally stabbed in their Rowlett, Texas home on June 6, 1996. In the early hours of that tragic morning, Darlie called 911, reporting that an intruder had broken into her home and attacked her and her 2 sons. Upon arrival, authorities found Devin and Damon with fatal stab wounds, both boys dead from their injuries. Darlie herself had knife wounds to her neck, forearm, and shoulder. A broken wine glass lay on the ground, and there was a torn window screen in the garage and a bloodied knife on the kitchen counter. During the investigation, authorities became suspicious of Routier's account. They noted inconsistencies in her statements and believed that some of her injuries might have been self-inflicted. The prosecution argued that financial difficulties and personal stress led Routier to harm her children. In February 1997, Darlie was convicted of the capital murder of her son Damon and sentenced to death. Notably, she was not tried for Devon's murder. Routier has consistently maintained her innocence, asserting that an unidentified intruder was responsible for the attacks. Over the years, multiple appeals have been filed on her behalf, citing potential investigative oversights and the need for advanced DNA testing. In 2018, a court ordered a third round of DNA testing on key pieces of evidence, including a bloodied fingerprint and a sock found outside the home. As of October 2025, the results of these tests are still pending, and she has been on death row for approximately 29 years. Case 6. Taylor Rene Parker. In the months leading up to her crime, Taylor Rene Parker fabricated an entire pregnancy to maintain her relationship with her boyfriend. She went to extraordinary lengths to support this deception, including faking ultrasounds and even hosting a gender reveal party for friends and family. On October 9, 2020, Parker visited the home of her acquaintance, 21-year-old Reagan Simmons Hancock in New Boston, Texas. Simmons Hancock was 35 weeks pregnant at the time. Parker attacked her, inflicting over 100 stab wounds, and then performed a crude cesarean section to remove the baby from Simmons Hancock's body. The child did not survive the horrific ordeal. Shortly after the attack, Parker was stopped by a state trooper for driving erratically. She had the deceased child with her and claimed she had just given birth. However, medical personnel quickly determined that she had not given birth, leading to her immediate arrest. In October 2022, a Bowie County jury found Parker guilty of capital murder. The following month, she was sentenced to death. Taylor Rene Parker was 27 years old when she committed this heinous crime. As of October 2025, she remains on death row, awaiting execution. Case 7. Virginia Susan Cottle. She was born on September 10, 1960, and was 37 years old when she committed a heinous crime on March 15, 1998. On that night, Cottle and her accomplice, Jonathan Goforth, entered the Lexington, Kentucky home of 73-year-old Lonetta White, the mother of Cottle's ex-fiancé. The pair brutally beat White to death in her own home, then ransacked the residence for valuables. After murdering the elderly woman, they placed her body in the trunk of her own car. They drove the vehicle to a rural area in Fayette County and set it on fire in an attempt to destroy evidence. Following the discovery of White's body, authorities quickly identified Cottle and Goforth as suspects. Both were apprehended and charged with murder, first-degree robbery, first-degree burglary, second-degree arson, and tampering with physical evidence. In March 2000, a jury found both Cottle and Goforth guilty on all charges. They were each sentenced to death on March 24, 2000. As of October 2025, Virginia Susan Cottle has been on Kentucky's death row for nearly 26 years. Case 8. Antoinette Renee Frank. She joined the New Orleans Police Department in 1993. On the night of March 4, 1995, she and her accomplice, Rogers Lacaze, carried out an armed robbery at the Kim Ein restaurant in New Orleans. During the robbery, they fatally shot two members of the Vu family who owned the establishment and Officer Ronald A. Williams II, who was working security at the restaurant. Following the murders, Frank and Lacaze were arrested and indicted on multiple counts of first-degree murder. Their trials were held separately. Lacaze was tried first in July 1995, found guilty, and sentenced to death. Frank's trial began in September 1995. The jury deliberated for just 22 minutes before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. The following day, they recommended the death penalty, which was formally imposed on October 20, 1995. She was 23 years old when she committed the homicide and has been on death row for nearly 30 years. In October 2023, the Louisiana Pardon Board denied her request for clemency. As of October 2025, no execution date has been set for Frank as she continues to pursue post-conviction appeals. Case 9. Michelle Sue Tharp. Michelle was born on January 23, 1970, and was 29 years old when she committed a grievous crime. In 1998, Tharp's 7-year-old daughter, Tasha Lee Lampinen, died from severe malnutrition, weighing less than 12 pounds at the time of her death. Following her death, Tharp and her then-boyfriend, Douglas Bittinger, transported Tasha's body across state lines and disposed of it in West Virginia. They then falsely reported her missing to authorities. Tharp and Bittinger were arrested and charged in connection with Tasha's death. In 2000, Tharp was convicted of first-degree murder and related offenses. She was subsequently sentenced to death. In 2014, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court upheld Tharp's conviction, but granted her a new penalty phase hearing, citing potential issues with the original sentencing. In 2018, a Washington County judge ordered that a new jury be impaneled to decide whether she should receive a life sentence or the death penalty. Tharp appealed this decision. As of October 2025, her appeal remains pending, and she has been on death row for approximately 24 years. Case 10. Brenda Andrew. Brenda Andrew was 32 years old when she was convicted in 2004 for the murder of her estranged husband, Rob Andrew. In 2001, Rob Andrew, an advertising executive, was fatally shot in the garage of his Oklahoma City home. Prosecutors alleged that Brenda Andrew and her boyfriend, James Pavitt, plotted the murder to collect on a life insurance policy. During the trial, the prosecution introduced evidence about Brenda Andrews' sexual history and demeanor, which her lawyers argue undermined her right to due process. Brenda Andrew and James Pavitt were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. In 2004, both were convicted and sentenced to death. Brenda was convicted of orchestrating the murder, while James was convicted for carrying out the killing. In January 2025, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of Brenda, confirming that the admission of prejudicial gendered evidence during her trial violated her due process rights. The court's decision sent the case back to lower courts for further review. As of October 2025, she has been on death row for approximately 21 years. Case 11. Blanche Taylor Moore, also known as the Black Widow, is 91 years old and is an American convicted murderer and suspected serial killer. She is currently on death row in North Carolina for the fatal poisoning of her boyfriend Raymond Reed in 1986. Moore is also suspected in the deaths of her father, mother-in-law, and first husband, as well as the attempted murder of her second husband in 1989. On May 29, 1952, Blanche married James Napoleon Taylor, a veteran and furniture restorer. They had 2 children together. In 1954, she began working as a cashier at Kroger, where she was eventually promoted to head cashier. In 1962, Blanche began an affair with Raymond Reed, the store manager. Taylor died on October 2, 1973, with the cause of death reported as a heart attack. After her husband's death, Blanche and Reed began dating publicly. By 1985, their relationship had soured. In 1986, Reed developed a mysterious illness, initially diagnosed as shingles, and was hospitalized in April. He died on October 7th, with doctors indicating the cause of death as Guillain-Barré syndrome. Blanche then began dating the Reverend Dwight Moore, whom she married on April 19, 1989. Shortly after their honeymoon, Dwight became severely ill and was hospitalized with symptoms of arsenic poisoning. Tests revealed he had 20 times the lethal dose of arsenic in his system, but he survived with lasting health issues. Investigations led to the exhumation of Taylor, Reed, and Blanche's father, all of whom showed elevated levels of arsenic. On July 18, 1989, Blanche was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in the deaths of Taylor and Reed and assault with a deadly weapon for the poisoning of Dwight. She was tried, found guilty, and sentenced to death on November 16, 1990. As of October 2025, she remains the oldest woman on death row and has been there for over 34 years. Case 12. Donna Marie Roberts. In 2001, Donna Marie Roberts conspired with her lover, Nathaniel Jackson, to murder her ex-husband, Robert Fingerhut, in Howland, Ohio. The motive was to collect over $500,000 in life insurance proceeds. Roberts and Jackson planned the murder through monitored phone calls and letters exchanged between them while Jackson was incarcerated. Roberts was arrested and charged with the murder of Robert Fingerhut in 2003. She was convicted and sentenced to death. Her conviction and sentence have been upheld through various appeals. She has been on death row since 2003. As of October 2025, she is 80 years old, making her one of the oldest women on death row in the United States. Case 13. Carlette Elizabeth Parker. She was born on April 1, 1965 in North Carolina and is a convicted murderer currently on death row in the state. In 1999, Parker was convicted of the first-degree murder and kidnapping of 86-year-old Alice Covington. Prosecutors alleged that Parker, a nurse, drowned Covington in her bathtub. The case drew significant attention due to Parker's profession and the nature of the crime. On March 30, 1999, a jury found her guilty of first-degree kidnapping and first-degree murder based on premeditation and deliberation, as well as under the felony murder rule. Parker was indicted on June 22, 1999, and faced a capital trial. She was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. As of October 2025, she is 59 years old and has been incarcerated for over 25 years, awaiting execution on North Carolina's death row. Case 14. Lisa Montgomery. Born on February 27, 1968, in Melbourne, Kansas, Lisa Montgomery grew up in a nightmare. Her childhood was filled with relentless physical and emotional abuse that destroyed her mind. Her mother trafficked her, allowing men to assault her repeatedly in exchange for money. The abuse never stopped. It led to diagnosed brain damage and complex post-traumatic stress disorder that would haunt her forever. By December 2004, Montgomery was 36 years old and deeply disturbed. She contacted Bobby Jo Stinnett, a 23-year-old pregnant woman from Skidmore, Missouri, pretending she wanted to buy a puppy. On December 16th, Montgomery arrived at Stinnett's home. The pregnant woman welcomed her inside, trusting and unsuspecting. But Montgomery had come for something else entirely. She attacked Bobby Jo suddenly, wrapping her hands around her throat. She choked her until she lost consciousness and collapsed on the floor. Then Montgomery picked up a kitchen knife. She cut into Bobby Jo's abdomen, slicing through skin and muscle to reach inside. She was performing a crude cesarean section, cutting the baby from its mother's womb. Bobby Jo regained consciousness during this horror. She fought desperately, struggling to save herself and her child. But Montgomery choked her again, squeezing harder this time until Bobby Jo stopped breathing. She was dead. Montgomery took the newborn baby and fled. She tried to pass the infant off as her own child, showing the baby to people and claiming she had just given birth. But investigators quickly saw through her lies. Montgomery was apprehended the day after the murder. She confessed to the crime. In 2007, she was convicted and sentenced to death. Her attorneys argued that her horrific childhood abuse should be considered, but the courts showed no mercy. After years of legal battles, the execution date was set. On January 13, 2021, Lisa Montgomery was executed by lethal injection at the Federal Correctional Complex in Terre Haute, Indiana. She was the first female inmate the federal government had executed in over 6 decades. She spent over 14 years on death row before her final day arrived. Montgomery's last words and final meal details were not widely publicized, but witnesses described her as calm and resigned to her fate in her final hours. Case 15. Kelly Gesendiner. Born on March 8, 1968, in Lawrenceville, Georgia, as Kelly Rene Brookshire, she endured abuse during her childhood and adolescence that left deep psychological scars. At 19, she married Jeff Banks, but the marriage didn't last long. She later married Douglas Gesendiner in 1989, divorced him in 1993, then remarried him in 1995. Together, they had a daughter, and Douglas became stepfather to Kelly's 2 sons from previous relationships. But in late 1996, Kelly began an affair with Gregory Owen. She wanted her husband gone, eliminated, so she could be with her lover and collect insurance money. Kelly conspired with Owen to murder Douglas. She manipulated him, convincing him that killing her husband was the only way they could be together. On February 7, 1997, Owen ambushed Douglas, forcing him into his own vehicle at knife point. He drove Douglas to a secluded area in Gwinnett County, Georgia. There, Owen struck Douglas with a nightstick repeatedly. Then he stabbed him multiple times with a knife, plunging the blade into Douglas's body until he died from his wounds. Kelly arrived shortly after the murder. Together, she and Owen set fire to Douglas's car and concealed his body, trying to destroy evidence of their crime. Police investigated and uncovered the conspiracy. Both Kelly and Owen were arrested and charged with murder. Prosecutors offered plea deals to both: life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Owen accepted immediately, pleading guilty and agreeing to testify against Kelly. But Kelly rejected the offer. She thought she could beat the charges. She was wrong. In 1998, Kelly Gesendiner was convicted of malice murder and sentenced to death. She became one of the few women on Georgia's death row. Kelly spent approximately 17 years on death row. During that time, she underwent a profound transformation. She embraced Christianity, pursued theological studies, and earned a degree behind bars. She became a source of support for fellow inmates, counseling many through personal crises. Other prisoners called her an inspiration, someone who had truly changed. In the days before her execution, numerous appeals for clemency poured in. Pope Francis, through his representative, urged the Georgia Board of Pardons to commute her sentence to life imprisonment. Despite these efforts, the board denied clemency. Kelly's time had run out. On September 30, 2015, Kelly Gesendiner was executed by lethal injection at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison in Jackson, Georgia. For her final meal, Kelly requested 2 Burger King Whoppers with cheese, 2 large orders of fries, cornbread, buttermilk, a salad with boiled eggs, and a pitcher of lemonade. She also asked for cherry vanilla ice cream. Her last words were a message of love and faith. She sang the hymn Amazing Grace as the lethal injection began, her voice growing weaker until it finally stopped. She was 47 years old when she died. Case 16. Lisa Coleman. In the early 2000s, Lisa Coleman entered into a relationship with Marcella Williams. The two women lived together in Arlington, Texas, sharing an apartment and their lives. Marcella had a son from a previous relationship, 9-year-old Devonte Marcel Williams. He should have been safe with his mother and her partner. Instead, he walked into a nightmare. On July 26, 2004, emergency services received a frantic call. They rushed to the apartment shared by Coleman and Williams, where they found Devonte unresponsive on the floor. Paramedics tried desperately to revive him, but it was too late. Devonte was pronounced dead at the scene. The autopsy revealed horrifying details. Devonte weighed only 35 pounds at the time of his death. That's the weight of a toddler, not a 9-year-old boy. He had been systematically starved. Medical examiners found evidence of prolonged malnutrition and severe physical abuse. Devonte's body was covered in scars and injuries. There were signs he had been restrained, tied up, and held captive. Both Coleman and Williams were arrested and charged with capital murder. Prosecutors argued that the two women had tortured Devonte, starving and abusing him until his small body couldn't survive anymore. Marcella Williams accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to a lesser charge in exchange for a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Lisa Coleman chose to go to trial. She thought she could convince a jury of her innocence. She was wrong. In 2006, Lisa Coleman was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. She was sent to death row to await execution. Coleman spent approximately 8 years on death row. Her legal team filed multiple appeals, arguing technicalities and procedural errors, but every appeal was denied. The execution date arrived. On September 17, 2014, Lisa Ann Coleman was executed by lethal injection at the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville. For her final meal, Coleman requested fried chicken, black-eyed peas, coleslaw, and a peach cobbler. She ate quietly, saying little. Her last words were brief. She expressed love for her family and asked for forgiveness, though she never fully admitted her guilt in Devonte's torture and death. She was 38 years old at the time of her execution. Case 17. Suzanne Basso. Born on May 15, 1954, in Schenectady, New York, Suzanne was one of 8 children in her family. Her early life seemed ordinary enough. In the early 1970s, she married James Peake, and they had 2 children together. The family later moved to Houston, Texas, where they adopted the surname Alley and claimed an Irish-American identity. Suzanne worked various jobs, including as a security guard and seamstress, but beneath the surface, something dark was growing. In 1997, Suzanne met Louis Charles Buddy Musso, a 59-year-old intellectually disabled man, at a church bazaar in New Jersey. They began a long-distance relationship. In June 1998, Musso moved to the Houston area to live with Suzanne. He thought he was going to start a new life with someone who cared about him. He had no idea he was walking into a death trap. Unbeknownst to Musso, Suzanne's intentions were far from genuine. Shortly after his arrival, she recruited accomplices. Her son James, Bernice Aarons Miller, Miller's children Craig and Hope Aarons, and Hope's fiancé Terrence Singleton. Together, they subjected Musso to horrific abuse. They forced him to perform household chores like a slave. They beat him repeatedly with belts, fists, and various objects. On August 25, 1998, the group escalated their torture. They beat Musso with belts, baseball bats, and other weapons for hours. His cries for mercy went unanswered. Then they forced him into a bathtub filled with a solution of kitchen cleaner and bleach. The chemicals burned his skin as they scrubbed him down. Finally, they dumped Musso's broken body in Galena Park, Texas, leaving him to die alone. A jogger discovered the body the next morning. An autopsy revealed that Musso had died from multiple blunt force injuries. Nearly every bone in his body had been broken. In 1999, Suzanne Basso was convicted of capital murder in Harris County, Texas. Despite the involvement of multiple accomplices, Basso was the only one sentenced to death. She spent over a decade on death row before her execution date arrived. On February 5, 2014, at the age of 59, Suzanne Basso was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Texas. For her final meal, Basso declined a special request. She ate the regular prison meal: beef tacos, refried beans, Spanish rice, and vanilla cake. Her last words were spoken to her family members who witnessed the execution. She told them she loved them and asked them to stay strong. She never apologized to Buddy Musso's family. Case 18. Kimberly McCarthy. Kimberly worked as an occupational therapist and home health aide in Lancaster, Texas. She had training, skills, and opportunities, but she also had a severe addiction problem. McCarthy struggled with crack cocaine addiction, which led to various legal issues over the years. She had convictions for forgery, prostitution, and theft of services. Her life was spiraling downward. On July 21, 1997, McCarthy visited her 71-year-old neighbor, Dorothy Booth. She claimed she needed to borrow sugar. It was a simple, innocent request, the kind neighbors make all the time. Dorothy opened her door and let McCarthy inside without suspicion. It was the last mistake she would ever make. Once inside, McCarthy attacked. She stabbed Dorothy multiple times with a knife, plunging the blade into the elderly woman's body repeatedly. Then McCarthy picked up a candelabrum and beat Dorothy with it, striking her head and body until she was dead. But McCarthy wasn't finished. She noticed Dorothy was wearing a diamond wedding ring. McCarthy grabbed the woman's hand and tried to pull the ring off, but it wouldn't come free. So McCarthy grabbed the knife again and severed Dorothy's finger to steal the ring. Then she ransacked the house, taking Dorothy's purse and car keys. She stole Dorothy's Mercedes-Benz and drove away. McCarthy pawned the stolen diamond ring and used the money to buy crack cocaine. She got high while Dorothy Booth lay dead in her home. Police arrested McCarthy after evidence linked her to the crime. Her fingerprints were everywhere, and witnesses had seen her driving Dorothy's car. In 1998, Kimberly McCarthy was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. She was sent to death row at the Mountain View unit in Texas. After exhausting her appeals over 15 years, McCarthy's execution date was set. On June 26, 2013, she was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Texas. For her final meal, McCarthy requested fried chicken, barbecue ribs, buffalo hot wings, catfish, dirty rice with gravy, onion rings, meaty beans, jalapeno peppers, cornbread, white cake, and a grape drink. Her last words were an apology. She said she was sorry for the pain she had caused and asked for God's forgiveness. She expressed love for her family and asked them to stay strong. She was 52 years old when she died, having spent about 15 years on death row. Case 19. Teresa Lewis. Born on April 26, 1969, in Danville, Virginia, Teresa Lewis grew up in a low-income family where both parents worked in a textile mill. She sang in church during her youth, but life was difficult. She dropped out of school at 16 and entered a marriage that produced a daughter, Darlie Lynn Bean. After her divorce, Teresa struggled with substance abuse, including alcohol and painkillers. In the spring of 2000, Teresa began working at the Dan River Textile Mill, where she met Julian Clifton Lewis Jr., a recent widower with 3 children. Teresa and her daughter moved in with Julian in June 2000, and the couple married shortly thereafter. For a while, things seemed stable. But in August 2002, Teresa learned about a $250,000 life insurance policy that her stepson, Charles J. Lewis, had obtained in preparation for his deployment to Iraq with the U.S. Army Reserve. Teresa saw an opportunity. She began planning a double murder to collect the insurance money. She met two men, Matthew Schallenberger and Rodney Fuller, and seduced them both. She convinced them to help her murder Julian and Charles. Teresa promised the men money and sex in exchange for killing her husband and stepson. She gave them funds to purchase murder weapons. On October 30th, 2002, Teresa left the door to her home unlocked. Late that night, Schallenberger and Fuller crept inside. They found Julian and Charles sleeping in their beds. Schallenberger and Fuller stood over them and opened fire, shooting both men multiple times. Julian and Charles died in their sleep, never knowing what hit them. Teresa was arrested and charged with capital murder. During interrogation, she confessed to the police. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to death on June 3, 2003. Despite appeals highlighting her limited mental capacity and arguments that she had been manipulated by Schallenberger and Fuller, all efforts to overturn her death sentence failed. Teresa Lewis spent approximately 7 years on death row at the Fluvanna Correctional Center for Women. During that time, she expressed profound remorse for her role in the murders. On September 23, 2010, at the age of 41, Teresa Lewis was executed by lethal injection at the Greensville Correctional Center in Jarrett, Virginia. For her final meal, Teresa requested fried chicken, peas with butter, a slice of German chocolate cake or apple pie, and a Dr. Pepper. Her last words were an apology to her victims' families. She said, "I just want Kathy to know that I love her and I'm very sorry." She was referring to Kathy Clifton, Julian's daughter and Charles's sister, who had lost both her father and brother. Case 20. Frances Newton. On April 7, 1987, a horrific discovery was made in a Houston apartment. Adrian Newton, age 30, his 7-year-old son Alton, and his 21-month-old daughter Farah were found shot to death. All 3 victims had been shot with a .25 caliber pistol. The gun belonged to a man Frances Newton had been seeing at the time. Frances was Adrian's wife and the mother of both children, but prosecutors argued she was also their murderer. According to the prosecution, Frances had taken out $50,000 life insurance policies on each family member about a month before their deaths. She named herself as the sole beneficiary. The motive was clear: money. Frances wanted to collect $150,000 in insurance money, and her family was standing in the way. Prosecutors also presented evidence that Frances had placed a paper bag containing the murder weapon in a relative's home shortly after the killings, trying to hide it. Frances maintained her innocence throughout the trial. She claimed that a drug dealer had murdered her family, not her. But the jury didn't believe her story. In October 1988, Frances Newton was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. She became one of the few African-American women on Texas's death row. Throughout her time on death row, Frances continued to proclaim her innocence. She filed numerous appeals, but all were denied. After spending nearly 17 years on death row, Frances Newton's execution date finally arrived. On September 14, 2005, at the age of 40, Frances Newton was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Texas. Her execution marked a grim milestone. She became the first African-American woman executed in Texas since the Civil War. For her final meal, Frances declined a special request. She ate the regular prison meal. Her last words were a continued proclamation of innocence. She said, "I am innocent. I am innocent. I am innocent. I did not kill my children." She repeated this 3 times before the lethal injection began. She maintained her innocence until her final breath. Case 21. Eileen Wuornos. Born on February 29, 1956, in Rochester, Michigan, Eileen Carol Wuornos' life was a disturbing tale of abuse, survival, and ultimately, murder. Her parents separated before her birth. She never met her father, who was incarcerated for sex crimes against children. Her mother abandoned Eileen and her brother at a young age, and they were raised by their grandparents. Reports indicate that Eileen suffered abuse from her grandfather. By her early teens, she was engaging in sex in exchange for goods. At 14, she became pregnant, and the child was placed for adoption. After her grandmother's death and being expelled from her grandparents' home, Wuornos turned to prostitution and drifted across various states, surviving on the streets. Between 1989 and 1990, while working as a prostitute along Florida highways, Wuornos murdered 7 men. She claimed each murder was in self-defense, alleging that the men had either raped her or attempted to assault her. But investigators found evidence suggesting otherwise. The victims were Richard Mallory, 51, an electronics store owner, murdered in November 1989. David Spears, 43, a construction worker, murdered in May 1990. Charles Carskadden, 40, a part-time rodeo worker, murdered in May 1990. Peter Sims, 65, a retired merchant seaman, went missing in June 1990. His body was never found. Troy Burris, 50, a delivery driver, murdered in July 1990. Charles Humphreys, 56, a retired Air Force major and former police chief, murdered in September 1990. Walter Antonio, 62, a truck driver, murdered in November 1990. Wuornos was apprehended on January 9, 1991, after a series of investigations linked her to the murders. In 1992, Wuornos was convicted of the murder of Richard Mallory and sentenced to death. She later pleaded guilty to additional murders, receiving multiple death sentences. Throughout her trials and appeals, Wuornos maintained that her actions were in self-defense. But she also expressed a desire to expedite her execution, stating that she would kill again if released. After spending over a decade on death row, Wuornos was executed by lethal injection on October 9, 2002, at Florida State Prison. For her final meal, Wuornos declined a special request. She drank a cup of coffee and nothing else. Her last words were chilling. "I just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th, like the movie, big mothership and all. I'll be back." She was 46 years old when she died. Her story became the subject of books, documentaries, and the film Monster, which won Charlize Theron an Academy Award. Case 22. Marilyn Plants. In 1988, Marilyn Plants, then 27 years old, engaged in an extramarital affair with 18-year-old William Clifford Bryson. Their relationship was passionate, intense, and ultimately deadly. Marilyn was married to Jim Plants, who worked the night shift at the Daily Oklahoma newspaper. He was a hard-working man who trusted his wife completely. But Marilyn and Bryson wanted Jim gone. Together, they conspired to murder him, planning to collect approximately $300,000 from his life insurance policy. Marilyn recruited Bryson and his friend Clinton McKimball to carry out the murder. She promised them money and continued her affair with Bryson. On August 26, 1988, the plan was set in motion. Bryson and McKimball waited for Jim to return home from his night shift at the newspaper. As Jim arrived and stepped out of his truck, the two men ambushed him. They attacked him with baseball bats, striking him repeatedly in the head and body. Jim fought back desperately, but he was outnumbered and overwhelmed. The beating continued until he collapsed, barely conscious. Then, to cover up the murder, Bryson and McKimball set Jim's body and truck on fire, trying to make it look like an accident. But investigators quickly determined the fire was staged. They found evidence of the beating and traced the crime back to Marilyn, Bryson, and McKimble. Marilyn Plants was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. In March 1989, she was convicted and sentenced to death. Her lover, William Bryson, also received a death sentence. He was executed in June 2000, more than a year before Marilyn. Clinton McKimble, in exchange for his testimony against Plants and Bryson, received a life sentence instead of death. Marilyn spent approximately 12 years on death row. During that time, she exhausted all her appeals. On May 1, 2001, at the age of 40, Marilyn Plants was executed by lethal injection at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. For her final meal, Marilyn requested pizza, nacho cheese Doritos, barbecue potato chips, and a strawberry milkshake. Her last words were directed to her family. She said, "I love you all very much. Tell Trina I love her. God bless you all." She made no apology to Jim Plants' family. Jim's relatives witnessed the execution. They said they felt justice had finally been served, though it could never bring Jim back. Case 23. Betty Lou Beats. Betty Lou married 6 times during her life, twice to the same man. Her relationships were marked by violence, conflict, and ultimately murder. At 15, Betty Lou married her first husband, Robert Franklin Granson. Over the years, she would marry 5 more times, with each relationship ending badly. In 1970, she shot her husband Billy York Lane twice in the back, but she was acquitted after Lane admitted to threatening her life. Remarkably, they remarried in 1972, then divorced again shortly thereafter. In 1978, she attempted to run over her third husband, Rene C. Threlkeld, with her car. He survived and later testified against her. On August 6, 1983, Betty Lou reported her 5th husband, Jimmy Don Beats, missing. She claimed he had disappeared from their home near Cedar Creek Lake in Henderson County, Texas. Authorities launched an extensive search, even dragging the lake for his body, but they found nothing. For 2 years, the case went cold. Then, acting on a tip, police returned to Betty Lou's property with cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar. They searched the property thoroughly. Finally, they made a horrifying discovery. 2 bodies were buried on Betty Lou's land. One body was Jimmy Don Beats, her 5th husband. The other was Doyle Wayne Barker, her 4th husband. Both had died from gunshot wounds. Betty Lou had murdered both men and buried them in her yard, collecting insurance money and living off their benefits. In 1985, Betty Lou Beats was convicted of capital murder for the death of Jimmy Don Beats and sentenced to death. She spent approximately 15 years on death row at the Mountain View Unit in Texas. On February 24, 2000, at the age of 62, Betty Lou Beats was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville Unit in Texas. For her final meal, Betty Lou declined a special request. She ate the regular prison meal instead. Her last words were simple. "I'd like to say sorry to the families I've hurt. I'm sorry. I love you all. God bless you all." Then the lethal injection began, and Betty Lou Beats died for her crimes. Case 24. Judy Buenawano. Born on April 4, 1943, in Quanah, Texas, Judy Buenawano would become one of Florida's most notorious serial killers, earning the nickname the Black Widow. At 14, she was incarcerated for attacking family members and subsequently chose to attend a reform school. After graduation in 1960, she became a nursing assistant. In 1961, she gave birth to her son, Michael. The following year, Judy met and married James Goodyear, a sergeant in the U.S. Air Force. After James returned from Vietnam, he died on September 16, 1971, under mysterious circumstances. His death was initially attributed to natural causes, but it was later revealed he had been poisoned with arsenic. Judy collected substantial life insurance benefits following his death. She then moved to Florida, where she met and lived with Bobby Joe Morris. In January 1978, Morris died suddenly. His death was later determined to be caused by arsenic poisoning. Once again, Judy benefited from life insurance payouts. In 1979, her son Michael became severely ill, exhibiting symptoms that led to paralysis. On May 13, 1980, Judy took Michael, who was wearing heavy braces due to his condition, canoeing. The canoe capsized, and Michael drowned. His death was initially considered an accident, but suspicions arose later when the pattern of deaths around Judy became clear. Judy received life insurance money following Michael's death. In 1983, she was involved with John Gentry, who survived a car explosion in Pensacola, Florida. Investigations revealed that Judy had been giving Gentry vitamin pills laced with arsenic. Further inquiries led to the exhumation of her previous partners and son. Testing confirmed arsenic poisoning in each case. Judy was arrested in 1984 and convicted for the murders of James Goodyear and Michael Buenoano, as well as the attempted murder of John Gentry. She was sentenced to death for James Goodyear's murder and received a life sentence for Michael's death. After spending 14 years on death row, Judy Buenoano was executed on March 30, 1998, at the age of 54 in Florida's electric chair. She became the first woman executed in Florida since 1848. For her final meal, Judy requested broccoli, asparagus, strawberries, and hot tea. Her last words were, "No, sir." That was her response when asked if she had any final statement. She offered no apology, no explanation, no remorse. Then the electric chair was activated and Judy Buenoano died for her crimes. Case 25. Velma Barfield. She was born Margie Velma Bullard on October 29, 1932 in Eastover, North Carolina. She was the second of 9 children in a family residing on a small tobacco and cotton farm. Raised in a strict Pentecostal Christian household, she experienced a challenging upbringing marked by poverty and hardship. At 17, Velma left school to marry Thomas Burke, with whom she had 2 children. The family lived harmoniously in Parkton, North Carolina for over 15 years. Their life together seemed stable and unremarkable during those early years of marriage. Following a hysterectomy and subsequent back pain, Velma developed an addiction to prescription drugs, leading to significant behavioral changes. Her marriage to Thomas Burke deteriorated, marked by frequent arguments and increasing tension. In 1969, after an argument, their house burned down, resulting in Thomas's death. The fire was considered accidental at the time. In 1970, she married Jennings Barfield, who died less than a year later from heart complications. Suspicion did not initially surround these deaths, and investigators had no reason to question the circumstances. Velma appeared to be an unlucky woman who had lost 2 husbands to tragic events. Between 1974 and 1978, Velma was involved in the deaths of several individuals. In 1978, she poisoned Stuart Taylor, fearing that he had discovered her financial forgeries. His death led to an autopsy revealing arsenic poisoning, prompting further investigations into her past. She was arrested in 1978 after the autopsy revealed arsenic poisoning in Stuart Taylor's system. She confessed to multiple murders, including those of her mother and patients under her care. In December 1978, she was convicted of first-degree murder for Stuart's death and sentenced to death. While on death row, Velma underwent a significant religious conversion, embracing Christianity and expressing remorse for her actions. She became known for her spiritual outreach to fellow inmates, earning the nickname Death Row Granny. Despite appeals for clemency from religious leaders and anti-death penalty advocates, Velma Barfield was executed by lethal injection on November 2, 1984, at Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina. She was 52 years old at the time of her execution. Case 26. Elizabeth Duncan. Elizabeth shared an unusually close and possessive relationship with her son, Frank Duncan, a successful attorney. Her attachment to him was so profound that it strained his personal relationships, as she often interfered in his affairs, fearing abandonment. Her obsessive love for her son bordered on pathological. In 1958, Frank met Olga Kupchik, a 30-year-old nurse, during Elizabeth's hospitalization following a self-harm attempt. The two quickly fell in love and married on June 20, 1958. Olga soon became pregnant, bringing joy to the young couple's life. Elizabeth vehemently opposed the union, perceiving Olga as a threat to her relationship with Frank. Determined to remove Olga from their lives, Elizabeth hired two men, Augustine Baldonado and Luis Moya, offering them $6,000 to murder her daughter-in-law. On November 17, 1958, the men kidnapped Olga from her Santa Barbara apartment, beat her, and buried her alive in a shallow grave near Carpinteria, California. Olga was 7 months pregnant at the time. The brutality of the crime shocked the community. Olga's disappearance prompted an investigation that led authorities to Elizabeth. Evidence revealed that Elizabeth had previously attempted to annul Frank and Olga's marriage by hiring a man to impersonate her son in court proceedings. Further inquiries uncovered the murder-for-hire plot, leading to the arrest of Elizabeth, Baldonado, and Moya. The trial began on February 24, 1959. Despite Elizabeth's attempts to portray herself as a victim of blackmail, the jury found her guilty of first-degree murder after deliberating for less than 5 hours. She was sentenced to death. On August 8, 1962, Elizabeth Ann Duncan was executed in the gas chamber at San Quentin State Prison, marking the last execution of a woman in California to date. Case 27. Carla Faye Tucker. Carla was born on November 18, 1959, in Houston, Texas. She was the youngest of 3 sisters in a troubled household. By age 8, Carla was smoking cigarettes, and by 10, she discovered she was the product of an extramarital affair. This revelation deeply affected her sense of identity and belonging. Her childhood was marked by instability and early exposure to drugs and promiscuous behavior. The lack of parental guidance and structure led her down a dangerous path of substance abuse and criminal activity from a very young age. In 1983, at 23 years old, Carla and her boyfriend Daniel Garrett, both under the influence of hard substances, broke into the Houston apartment of Jerry Lynn Dean, intending to steal motorcycle parts. During the burglary, they encountered Dean and Deborah Thornton, who was sleeping in the apartment. During the course of the encounter, under the influence of drugs, Carla and Garrett brutally murdered both individuals using a pickaxe. Carla later admitted to experiencing a rush of pleasure with each swing of the weapon, a statement that would haunt her case for years to come. Carla was arrested about a month after the murders. In 1984, she was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. The brutality of the crime and her own admissions about enjoying the killings made her case particularly notorious in Texas. While on death row, Carla experienced a profound religious conversion, embracing Christianity and becoming a born-again Christian. She expressed deep remorse for her actions, participated in prison ministry, and became known for her transformed character. Her case attracted international attention and sparked debates about redemption and the death penalty. Despite international pleas for clemency from religious leaders, the Pope, and even some of the victim's family members who believed in her transformation, Karla Faye Tucker was executed by lethal injection on February 3, 1998, at the age of 38. She served 14 years on death row and became the first woman executed in Texas since the Civil War. From death row to execution, these are the stories Crimelands brings you. More shocking cases are coming soon. Subscribe now so you don't miss them. Until next time, stay safe. Thanks for watching.